Steve. A quick question on Russian movements and actions inside of Syria. What percentage can you give a sense of what kind of activity they're up to right now? How much of it is targeted at Islamic State or, Nusra? And, and give a sense of what is their kind of firepower in the country. I don't know how many weeks after their supposed withdrawal.
Well, when the Russians first came in, they claimed that they wanted to fight ISIL. And in reality, only a small fraction of their strikes were against ISIL. About 80% of their strikes were against the opposition. Since the cessation of hostilities was declared, we have seen that shift. At one point, the Russian primarily had been striking ISIL. At one point, I think, in the last, week or so, the Russians, we estimated, really more than 70% of their strikes were against ISIL. So I don't have today's figure, and we don't track it, that closely. But the Russians have been, striking either ISIL or, in many cases, Nusra. That said, we have seen an uptick, a general uptick in the number of ceasefire or cessation of hostilities violations. We have seen an uptick in the violence, primarily regime elements coming into contact with other forces. So this is a concern to us, and we've called on the Russians several times to use their influence with the Syrian regime to try and tamp this down.
And do you believe at this point that they're preparing for an end to the ceasefire? Does it look that way from the positioning?
Well, I'm not going to predict that. I don't know what their intentions are. What I do know is that we have seen, regime forces, with some Russian support as well, begin to mass and concentrate combat power around Aleppo. So this is something that we're concerned about and something that we're keeping an eye on. That said, it's primarily al-Nusra who holds Aleppo. And, of course, al-Nusra not part of the cessation of hostilities. So it's complicated. We're watching it. Our focus, though, as the Combined Joint Task Force, is ISIL. And so don't forget that. That's our focus. The cessation of hostilities, the diplomatic and political processes, while they certainly are of interest to us and potentially could influence our operations peripherally, our focus remains ISIL.
Thanks, Steve.
Steve, has this been a significant uptick just recently, or is this the uptick that you've been talking about for weeks?
Right. It's the one. It's just been kind of, but it's kind of moving up. Right. It's a gradual increase. So, last week a little bit more than 2 weeks ago, which was a little bit more than 3 weeks ago. So it is, kind of an incremental uptick or increase.
Tolga's